The vacant podium stood like a silent accusation. For 500 years, through countless sessions of the Star Assembly, that empty space had remained, untouched, unmoved, unaddressed. Yet somehow, it spoke louder than any voice that had ever echoed through the grand chamber of Lysithia's central dome. Aaron Solis paused at the entrance, his eyes drawn immediately to that absence among presences. Even from this distance, he could see the faint shimmer of the preservation field that had kept the podium pristine for half a millennium. No dust settled there. No marks marred its surface. It remained exactly as it had been on the day Earth's final ambassador had walked away, never to return. Preserved, like a wound that refused to heal. First time seeing it in person? The voice belonged to a Thalaxian attendant, her translucent skin rippling with the bioluminescent patterns of her species' formal greeting. They say humans often have a strong reaction. Aaron smiled faintly. I'm not fully human. The Thalaxian's inner lights flickered in what might have been embarrassment. Forgive me. Your appearance is convincingly terrestrial. My genetics are half-modified, Aaron explained, his eyes still fixed on the empty podium. Standard adaptations for deep space habitation. I was born on Outpost Vega, 3 generations removed from Earth. Yet you represent Earth today? The question carried undertones of both curiosity and caution. Unofficially, Aaron corrected, I'm here as a citizen of Earth, the first in 5 centuries to be granted observer status at the Assembly. The Thalaxian's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. A controversial decision. Precisely why I'm here early, Aaron said, finally turning away from the vacant podium. I wanted to see it without an audience. As the Thalaxian moved away, Aaron approached the central floor of the Assembly. The grand chamber was designed as a perfect circle, with concentric rings of seating rising like waves around a central speaking area. Each delegation had its own designated space, the positioning meticulously arranged according to diplomatic status, historical significance, and a complex algorithm of interspecies relations that had evolved over millennia. And there, in what should have been the most prominent position, sat Earth's empty podium. Unlike the others, it bore no modern communication interfaces, no holographic projectors, no neural linking apparatus. Just a simple surface of what appeared to be polished stone, actual physical material in an age when most construction was molecular or energy-based. Aaron had studied the specifications. Petrified wood from an ancient earth tree, preserved through a process now lost to time. A relic, a memorial, a reminder. He reached out, his hand hovering just centimeters from the preservation field. What would happen if he touched it? Would alarms sound? Would security drones descend? Or would nothing happen at all? The ultimate statement on humanity's irrelevance. I wouldn't, came a deep, resonant voice from behind him. Aaron turned to find himself facing a Kryn, one of the massive, armored beings that served as the Assembly's ceremonial guard. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with exoskeletal plating that shimmered with embedded security systems, the Kryn cut an imposing figure against the chamber's ethereal architecture. The field is calibrated to genetic signatures, the Kryn continued. It would not recognize yours. Because I'm not fully human? The Kryn's facial plates shifted in what might have been the species equivalent of a frown. Because you are not the ambassador of Earth. No one is. No one has been for 500 years. Aaron nodded slowly. Yet the podium remains. As a warning, the Kryn stated flatly. Or a promise, Aaron countered. The Kryn's armor plates clicked slightly, a sound Aaron recognized as their version of dismissive laughter. The Assembly convenes in 3 hours. As an observer, you should familiarize yourself with protocols before then. As the massive guard moved away, Aaron couldn't help but notice how its gaze lingered on the empty podium, not with the reverence of preservation, but with the wariness one might show a dormant weapon. He wondered how many others viewed that silent space the same way, not as a symbol of absence, but as a threat of return. The Star Assembly began precisely as the ancient texts had described it. First came the resonance, a haunting, harmonious sound that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the chamber itself. Not quite music, not quite language. It vibrated at frequencies that touched something primal in the nervous systems of all present species. Aaron felt it in his chest, a gentle pressure that seemed to synchronize his heartbeat with some greater cosmic rhythm. Then came the procession of lights, each delegation activating their ancestral illumination in sequence, from the oldest members to the newest. The chamber transformed into a living constellation, with patterns of light that represented billions of years of collective evolution. Aaron watched from his observer's platform, positioned high above the main floor, far enough to emphasize his non-member status, close enough to witness every detail. The diplomat in him appreciated the choreography. The historian in him recognized the weight of tradition. The human in him felt the crushing isolation of being the only one of his kind in a gathering of 17,000 sentient beings, representing over 400 distinct civilizations, all of whom shared, to varying degrees, a memory of Earth as both creator and destroyer. The final ceremonial light activated, belonging to the Solari, the most recent addition to the Assembly at just 70 years of membership, and a hush fell over the chamber as attention shifted to the central dais where the Council of Five would appear. They materialized simultaneously, the elected representatives of the Assembly's 5 foundation branches. No species could claim more than one position on the Council, and no Council member could serve more than one term in their lifetime. Their identities remained hidden behind ceremonial masks until the moment of materialization, a tradition dating back to the earliest days of the Assembly, when assassination had been a common political tool. At the center stood Valkar, instantly recognizable by the distinctive crest that rose above his mask. A member of the Vexillian species, known for their analytical minds and absolute adherence to precedent, Valkar had been a controversial choice for council leader. His rise to power had coincided with the growing movement to permanently remove Earth's empty podium from the assembly chamber. A movement that, according to Aaron's sources, would culminate today. We convene the 7,412th session of the Star Assembly, Valkar announced, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into the standard galactic language. May our deliberations bring wisdom, our decisions bring peace, and our unity bring strength. The traditional response rippled through the chamber. As it has been, as it shall be. Aaron remained silent. Those were not his words to speak. Valkar continued. Before we address the scheduled matters, the Council has unanimously approved an emergency resolution for immediate consideration. This resolution concerns a matter of historical significance and future security. A murmur spread through the Assembly. Emergency resolutions were rare, reserved for imminent threats or extraordinary opportunities that couldn't wait for the normal deliberative process. For 5 centuries, Valkar said, his voice taking on a formal cadence, we have maintained a symbol of our past within this sacred chamber. The vacant podium of Earth has stood as a testament to both the greatest contributions and the gravest transgressions in our shared history. Aaron felt his heart rate increase. So they weren't waiting. The resolution was coming now. This symbol has served its purpose. Valkar continued. New generations rise who know Earth only as a myth, a cautionary tale from a distant past. The vacant podium no longer serves as a meaningful reminder. Instead, it has become an object of unhealthy fascination, a relic that binds us to ancient fears rather than future progress. The murmuring grew louder. Aaron scanned the chamber, trying to gauge the reactions. Some delegations seemed to be signaling agreement. Others remained conspicuously still, while a few showed signs of agitation. Therefore, the Council proposes Resolution E7412, the formal removal of Earth's podium from the Assembly Chamber, the reclamation of Earth's designated position for future worthy civilizations, and the transfer of all historical records concerning Earth to the sealed archives, accessible only to qualified scholars with approved research parameters. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, lights, and movements, each species expressing shock, approval, or protest according to their biological nature. Valkar allowed it to continue for precisely 10 seconds before activating the silence protocol, a subtle field that dampened all communication except that which passed through official channels. As this is an emergency resolution, he said into the enforced quiet, we will proceed directly to position statements from each branch, followed by a full assembly vote. No amendments will be considered at this time. Aaron felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. This had been planned meticulously. The timing, the procedure, even the seating arrangements had been carefully orchestrated to minimize opposition. He watched as the branch representatives began their statements, each one clearly prepared in advance, their arguments flowing too smoothly to be spontaneous. 4 of the 5 branches spoke in favor of the resolution. Only the collective of independent worlds, represented by a Solari delegate whose bioluminescent patterns betrayed nervous uncertainty, offered a tepid suggestion that perhaps more time for consideration would be prudent. Valcar dismissed this with practiced diplomacy. The Council appreciates the collective's caution, but this matter has been informally discussed for over 50 years. The time for action has come. As the formal voting process began, Aaron activated his communication implant, sending a pre-composed message to the only ally he had managed to secure during his brief time on Lysithea, Leora, a Thalaxian scholar specializing in pre-isolation human history. It's happening now. They're voting to remove the Podium and seal all Earth records. Her response came instantly. Where are you? Observer Platform 7, but it doesn't matter. I have no speaking rights. Stay there. I'm activating the contingency. Aaron felt a flutter of anxiety. The contingency had been Leora's idea, a desperate measure that risked not only his observer status, but potentially his freedom. Yet watching the voting indicators flash across the chamber, with approval rates already exceeding 60%, he knew they had no choice. The final branch was casting its votes when a piercing tone cut through the silence protocol, the unmistakable sound of the ancient right of witness being invoked. All attention shifted to the source, Leora, standing at the edge of the Thalaxian delegation section, her body pulsing with the formal patterns of academic authority. The Assembly recognizes Scholar Leora of Thalax, Valcar announced, unable to deny the ancient privilege that allowed any recognized expert to provide relevant historical context before a final vote. Esteemed Council, honored delegates, Leora began, her translated voice calm but firm. Before you complete this momentous vote, I must fulfill my duty as a keeper of knowledge. The removal of Earth's Podium is not merely a symbolic act, it constitutes a violation of the covenant of isolation that ended the interspecies war. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Few living beings had direct knowledge of the covenant's specific terms. It had been sealed after its signing, with only general principles made public. The preservation of Earth's place in the Assembly was not a courtesy. Leora continued. It was a binding condition of the peace, agreed to by all founding branches and ratified by every member civilization since. To remove it unilaterally would constitute a breach of our most sacred compact. Valcar's mask betrayed no emotion, but the stiffening of his posture was unmistakable. Scholar Leora, the terms of the covenant are classified beyond your clearance level. Your statement cannot be verified and must be dismissed as speculative. I do not speak from speculation, Leora countered, her bioluminescence intensifying. I speak as the curator of the Thalaxian Memory Vault, which contains one of the 7 original copies of the Covenant, preserved in its entirety, including the final protocol that your council has conveniently forgotten. Murmurs spread through the chamber again, and this time, Valcar did not activate the silence protocol. Instead, he conferred hurriedly with the other council members, their private exchange hidden behind encryption fields. Aaron watched the confusion spread across the assembly. This was the moment they had planned for, the narrow window of uncertainty where a symbolic gesture might tip the balance. With a deep breath, he activated the second phase of their contingency. A small device concealed in his palm connected wirelessly to the chamber's ancient systems that had been designed, ironically, by human engineers in the early days of the assembly. Within seconds, he had access to the one protocol that had never been updated or replaced, the ambassador recognition system. As Valcar turned back to address the assembly, the lights throughout the chamber flickered briefly, an almost imperceptible interruption that nonetheless caused the council leader to pause mid-gesture. Then, for the first time in 500 years, Earth's vacant podium activated. The preservation field dissolved. The simple stone surface began to glow with a soft blue light, and projected above it appeared a single rotating symbol, the ancient emblem of Earth, a blue sphere cradled by two olive branches. "What is the meaning of this?" Valkar demanded, his translator failing to hide the alarm in his voice. "Security protocols have been breached." Aaron stood from his observer's seat, drawing all eyes upward. "Not breached," he called out, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Recognized." With deliberate movements, he descended from the platform, walking toward the central floor where no observer was permitted to tread. The Kryn guards moved to intercept him, but halted at a sharp command from one of the council members, a Meridian whose species was known for their rigid adherence to procedure. "The system is responding to a recognized diplomatic signal," the Meridian counselor said. "We must determine its validity before taking action." Aaron continued his descent, each step measured, each breath controlled. He had trained for this moment, had been bred for it, though he had only learned that truth recently. His very existence was the culmination of a 500-year plan set in motion by the last humans to walk these halls. As he reached the assembly floor, the podium's light intensified, casting his shadow long across the circular chamber. The emblem of Earth rotated faster, then expanded to project a series of authentication codes, genetic markers that corresponded to the DNA flowing through Aaron's veins. "I am Aaron Solace," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "I carry the genetic signature of Ambassador Ilara Solace, the last official representative of Earth to address this assembly. I claim the right of hereditary voice." "Impossible," Valkar hissed. "The right of hereditary voice applies only to recognized member civilizations." "Earth's membership was never revoked," Leora interjected, still standing at the edge of the Thalaxian section. "It was placed in abeyance under the terms of the Covenant of Isolation, a self-imposed exile with specific conditions for reintegration." Aaron took another step forward. He was now standing directly before Earth's podium, close enough to touch it, though he kept his hands at his sides. "I do not claim to speak for Earth officially," he said, addressing the entire assembly rather than just the council. "I am not here to announce humanity's return to galactic affairs. I am here to remind you of a promise made, a promise this assembly seems eager to forget." Valkar's composure cracked slightly. "This theatrical display changes nothing. The resolution has been properly presented and the vote nearly completed. The procedures of the assembly must be respected, as must its foundational principles," Aaron countered, "including the principle that no civilization can be erased from our shared history simply because its memory has become inconvenient." He turned slowly, taking in the vast chamber with its thousands of delegates. "Many of you know Earth only as a name, a distant threat that withdrew from the galaxy centuries before your ancestors evolved sentience. Some of you know it as the birthplace of technologies your civilizations still rely upon. Others remember it as the instigator of the greatest conflict our galaxy has ever known." Aaron paused, letting his gaze settle on Valkar. "But how many of you know why Earth withdrew? How many have read the true terms of the Covenant? Not just the public declaration, but the final protocol that scholar Leora mentioned." "This is irrelevant," Valkar snapped. "Ancient history has no bearing on current security considerations." "Doesn't it?" Aaron asked softly. "Then why has your council been monitoring deep space for Earth signals with increasing urgency over the past decade? Why have 3 specialized task forces been established to analyze what you call terrestrial transmission anomalies?" The chamber erupted again, this time with demands for explanation. Valkar raised his hands for silence, but the silence protocol remained inactive, apparently overridden by the same ancient system that had recognized Aaron's presence. "A security matter," Valkar declared over the din. "Classified information that should never have reached an observer's ears." "Not just an observer," Aaron corrected. "A citizen of Earth." One who knows that these anomalies began precisely 50 years ago, coinciding with the first serious proposal to remove Earth's podium from this chamber. He turned back to the podium, placing his hand upon its surface for the first time. The stone felt warm beneath his palm, vibrating slightly as if awakening from a long dormancy. The final protocol of the covenant contained what humans called the last oath, a promise that humanity would remain in self-imposed isolation for as long as the assembly honored three conditions. Aaron's voice grew stronger, amplified now by the podium's ancient systems. First, that Earth's place in the assembly would remain preserved, as a reminder of both our contributions and our transgressions. Second, that no species would be permitted to claim our home system or colonize our planet. And third, most importantly, that no attempt would be made to erase humanity from the collective memory of galactic civilization. Valkar's mask concealed his expression, but his rigid posture betrayed his tension. These alleged conditions, even if they existed, would have no binding force after 5 centuries. Then why? Aaron asked quietly. Has every attempt to violate them been met with precisely calibrated responses from Earth? Responses that demonstrate awareness of your actions without ever escalating to direct communication. A new murmur spread through the chamber, not of outrage now, but of unease. Many delegations had heard rumors of these incidents, unmanned probes that approached Earth's solar system only to be disabled by precise energy pulses. Archival purges that mysteriously failed when they targeted human historical records. Even whispers of dreams shared across species, dreams of a blue planet watching, waiting. Earth has kept its promise. Aaron continued. Humanity withdrew from galactic affairs completely, allowing wounds to heal and new relationships to form without our disruptive presence. We asked only that you remember us, not with fear, not with reverence, but simply with acknowledgement that we existed and might exist again. He removed his hand from the podium, and as he did so, the emblem of Earth dimmed slightly. I am not here to reclaim this seat. I am here to remind you why it remains empty, not as a monument to a fallen power, but as a placeholder for a civilization that chose isolation over continuing conflict. Valkar stepped forward, his ceremonial robes billowing around him. A pretty speech, citizen solace, but it changes nothing. Your genetic connection to a long-dead ambassador grants you no authority here. The resolution will proceed to its final vote. Aaron nodded slowly. As is your right under assembly law. But before you cast those votes, perhaps you should look outside. Confusion rippled through the chamber, but already some delegates were receiving notifications through their various communication systems. Displays began to activate throughout the assembly, showing exterior views of Lysithia's skies. There, hanging in perfect formation above the central dome, were 3 vessels of unmistakably human design, sleek, obsidian shapes against the planet's golden atmosphere. They carried no visible weapons, broadcast no threatening signals. They simply existed, silent and watchful. Their hulls reflecting Lysithia's sunlight in patterns that resembled Morse code, one of humanity's earliest forms of long-distance communication. 3 ships, Aaron said into the stunned silence. 1 for each condition of the Covenant. They appeared in orbit 20 minutes ago, bypassing every detection system this planet possesses. Valkar's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. This is a violation of Lysithia's neutrality, an act of aggression against the Assembly itself. Is it? Aaron asked calmly. They've made no demands, threatened no action, targeted no systems. They simply arrived, just as I did, to witness this historic vote. He gestured toward the ships visible on the displays. They carry no weapons, Council Leader, but they carry something far more powerful. Proof that humanity has not forgotten its place in the galaxy, even if the galaxy wishes to forget humanity. A new voice entered the conversation, the Meridian Counselor who had halted the Kryn guards earlier. These vessels, they are crewed? Aaron turned to face her. Yes, Counselor. By humans who have lived in deep space for generations, maintaining the watch that the Covenant required, not warriors, Not diplomats, simply witnesses. Witnesses to what? Valcar demanded. To whether the assembly keeps its word. Aaron replied simply. The last oath works both ways. Council leader, humanity promised isolation in exchange for remembrance. Break one, and you invalidate the other. The implication hung in the air like a physical presence. No one in the chamber had personal memory of the interspecies war, but every civilization represented had historical records of its devastation. The prospect of humanity returning, not as the peaceful observers these three ships represented, but as the force that had once brought the galaxy to the brink of collapse, sent a collective shudder through the assembly. Valcar conferred urgently with the other council members, their private exchange growing visibly heated. Finally, he turned back to address the chamber. In light of new information, the council withdraws Resolution E74-2 for further consideration at a later date. The assembly will proceed to the next scheduled matter. A mixture of relief and apprehension swept through the chamber. Aaron remained standing before the podium, his expression neutral despite the victory. He had won this battle. But at what cost? The ships above Lysithea had revealed a truth he had hoped to introduce more gradually. Humanity had never truly disappeared. It had simply been watching, waiting, a shadow presence at the edges of galactic civilization. As the assembly slowly returned to its normal procedures, Leora approached him, her bioluminescence pulsing with a pattern he recognized as cautious optimism. It worked, she whispered. But I never expected actual ships. How did you arrange that? I didn't, Aaron admitted quietly. I knew there were deep space stations, isolated outposts maintaining the watch, but I had no direct communication with them. My mission was supposed to be purely symbolic. Leora's lights flickered with alarm. Then how? The same way they knew to come now, at this precise moment, Aaron said, glancing upward though the ships were not visible from inside the dome. They've been watching, always watching. The last oath required it. What will they do now? Aaron shook his head slightly. Nothing, I hope. Their presence made the point. Removing them would only escalate tensions. As if in answer to his unspoken concern, the displays throughout the chamber suddenly showed the three vessels breaking formation. For a heart-stopping moment, delegates across the assembly tensed, fearing an aggressive maneuver. Instead, the ships aligned themselves to project a single, massive image onto Lysithea's upper atmosphere, the same emblem of Earth that had appeared above the podium, visible now to the entire planet below. Then, as silently as they had arrived, the vessels vanished, not through conventional propulsion, but in a ripple of distorted space that suggested technology far beyond current assembly capabilities. A final message appeared briefly on the assembly's communication network, transmitted on frequencies that hadn't been used in centuries yet instantly recognized by every system in the chamber. Earth acknowledges. 3 simple syllables that carried the weight of both reassurance and warning. Aaron felt something shift within him, a tension releasing that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Whatever happened next, he had fulfilled his purpose. Earth's place in the assembly remained secure, at least for now. The memory of humanity would continue to echo through galactic civilization, not as a fading myth, but as a living possibility. As the assembly continued its proceedings, Aaron quietly withdrew from the central floor. He had no further role to play today. The vacant podium remained, not filled, but touched, not occupied, but acknowledged. And somewhere, beyond the reach of assembly sensors, 3 ships were returning to their hidden outposts, carrying word that the Covenant still held. The last oath remained unbroken, and Earth's long silence would continue. Not from fear or weakness, but from choice. A choice that could, someday, be unmade. You understand you can never return to the assembly, Leora said. They stood on the observation deck of Lysithea's orbital station, watching the steady stream of departing diplomatic vessels. 3 days had passed since the dramatic confrontation in the assembly chamber. 3 days of closed council sessions, frantic diplomatic communiques, and escalating rumors throughout the galactic community. Aaron nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the station's transparent dome. My observer status was revoked this morning, officially for procedural violations. Unofficially for terrifying the council, Leora added, her bioluminescence rippling with what he had come to recognize as her version of a sardonic smile. Valkar has commissioned 3 separate security reviews since the ships appeared. He's convinced Earth has been infiltrating assembly systems for centuries. Has it? Aaron asked, genuinely curious. Leora's lights pulsed in the Thalaxian equivalent of a shrug. Who can say? The point is, you've accomplished what you came for. The resolution has been withdrawn, not just postponed. According to my sources, it won't be reconsidered for at least another century. A century, Aaron repeated softly. Another 100 years of silence. Is that not what Earth wanted? The continuation of the covenant? Aaron turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. Yes, but I've been thinking about why the last oath was structured as it was. Why demand that the podium remain? Why insist on being remembered if the goal was truly complete isolation? Leora's bioluminescence dimmed to a contemplative glow. You believe there was more to the withdrawal than avoiding further conflict. I believe, Aaron said carefully, that my ancestor, Ambassador Elara Solis, embedded a message in the structure of the covenant itself. A message that wouldn't be understood for generations. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a medallion bearing the emblem of Earth, but with a curious emptiness where half the globe should be. It had been his only inheritance, passed down through his family for 5 centuries. This was hers, he explained, holding it up so that Lysithia's sun caught its metallic surface. For 500 years, we've interpreted the missing half as a symbol of Earth's diminished presence in galactic affairs. But what if it represents something else? Not what was lost, but what was yet to be found. Leora studied the medallion, her sensory appendages extending slightly to better perceive its details. A puzzle piece waiting for its match. Or a hemisphere waiting for its complement, Aaron suggested. Not Earth withdrawing from the galaxy, but creating space for the galaxy to eventually join with Earth. Not an ending, but a pause, a breath between movements in a longer composition. He closed his hand around the medallion, feeling its familiar contours press against his palm. The last oath wasn't meant to be permanent. It was meant to create time. Time for wounds to heal, yes, but also time for both humanity and the assembly to evolve beyond their old patterns. The empty podium wasn't a memorial to what had been lost. It was a placeholder for what might someday be regained. Leora's bioluminescence pulsed with cautious interest. You think the ships that appeared were signaling that this time has come? No, Aaron said after a moment's reflection. I think they were responding to a perceived threat to the covenant, but their appearance and the council's reaction to it revealed something important. The assembly isn't ready. And perhaps humanity isn't either. He turned back to the viewport, where Lysithia's golden atmosphere curved against the blackness of space. But someday, the match will be made. The hemisphere will find its complement, and Earth's long silence will end, not with a return to old conflicts, but with the beginning of something new. Leora moved to stand beside him, her translucent form catching the starlight. And what will you do until then, citizen of Earth? Aaron smiled faintly. What my ancestors have done for 5 centuries. Watch. Wait. Remember. And perhaps prepare. Not for war, not for dominance, but for the day when the vacant podium truly needs to be filled. As they stood in silence, a notification appeared on the station's information display. The last council member had departed Lysithia, returning to their homeworld. The emergency session was officially over. Life in the assembly would continue as it had for centuries, with one small but significant difference. Now, when delegates looked at Earth's vacant podium, they wouldn't see just an empty space preserved by tradition. They would see a place that had been claimed, touched, defended. A symbol not of absence, but of potential presence. And somewhere in the depths of space, humanity continued its self-imposed exile, Not forgotten, not diminished, but evolving in ways the assembly could only imagine. Waiting for the day when silence would no longer be necessary, when the last barriers between Earth and the galaxy could finally fall away. Until then, the podium would remain empty, but no longer ignored. Earth acknowledged, and someday it would speak again. The recording chamber was small, barely large enough for Aaron and the communication equipment, located deep within the departing Thalaxian vessel. It offered the only secure transmission point he could access without alerting assembly security. Recording authenticated, announced the system in its neutral voice. Quantum encryption active. Transmission will commence upon completion. Aaron took a deep breath, centering himself before the sensor array. This message would travel along pathways unknown even to him. Hidden channels established centuries ago and maintained by generations of deep space watchers. It would reach Earth eventually, the actual Earth, not the scattered outposts and secret stations that orbited distant stars under human control. This is Aaron Solis, genetic descendant of Ambassador Alara Solis, recording from the Thalaxian diplomatic vessel Luminous Inquiry, currently departing Lysithea space. Mission status: partially successful. The resolution to remove Earth's podium from the assembly has been withdrawn. Our place in galactic memory remains secured, at least for now. He paused, organizing his thoughts. This wasn't just a mission report, it was perhaps the most important communication he would ever send. The appearance of the three Watcher vessels was unexpected. Their timing was perfect. But their presence has altered the equation significantly. The assembly now knows with certainty that humanity has maintained technological capabilities beyond current galactic standards. This has generated both fear and fascination, exactly the complicated reaction the Covenant was designed to avoid. Aaron fingered the half-Earth medallion as he continued. I believe we are approaching a critical juncture, one that Ambassador Alara may have anticipated. The assembly has evolved in our absence, but old fears remain deeply embedded in their collective consciousness. They remember Earth not as we were, but as they perceived us, simultaneously creators and destroyers, benevolent and terrifying. He leaned closer to the sensor array, his voice dropping slightly, though the transmission quality would remain unchanged. And perhaps they're right to maintain that caution. The question before us now is not whether Earth could return to galactic society, but whether we should, and if so, in what capacity. The recording system pulsed softly, indicating the halfway point of the allowed transmission time. Aaron nodded, moving to his central recommendation. Based on my observations and the reaction to recent events, I do not believe the time has come for full reintegration. The Assembly's response to the mere suggestion of Earth's renewed attention demonstrates lingering trauma that would make genuine cooperation difficult at present. However, I also believe that complete isolation has reached the limits of its utility. He held up the medallion before the sensor array, allowing its image to be captured clearly. I now understand what my ancestor intended with this symbol. Not division, but incompletion. Not separation, but potential unity. The Covenant was never meant to be permanent. It was a chrysalis, a protected space for transformation. Aaron lowered the medallion, his expression resolute. I recommend a graduated approach to re-establishing contact, not through official channels, not through the Assembly, but through cultural and scientific exchange conducted by individuals, much as I have done, but with greater purpose and coordination. Let humanity be reintroduced not as a political entity, but as a collection of voices, ideas, and contributions. The system pulsed again, final warning before transmission would begin. I am returning to Outpost Vega as instructed, but request reassignment as soon as feasible. There is work to be done on the fringes of assembly space, connections to be made, understandings to be fostered. The vacant podium must remain empty for now, but that doesn't mean Earth's voice cannot be heard in other ways. He straightened, offering a formal bow to conclude. Earth has acknowledged. Now let Earth engage, carefully, thoughtfully, but with purpose. The silence has served its time. Let us prepare for what comes next. The system chimed softly. Recording complete. commencing transmission via secure quantum channel. Arn watched as the message was encoded, compressed, and launched into subspace, beginning its long journey to a home planet he had never seen, carrying words that might help shape the next chapter in humanity's complex relationship with the galaxy that both feared and needed it. As the transmission completed, he felt a curious lightness, as if setting down a burden he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. His official mission was over, but his true work was just beginning. Whatever Earth decided, whatever path humanity ultimately chose, he had ensured that choice would remain possible. The vacant podium would continue to stand in the assembly chamber, silent, waiting, but no longer forgotten. And someday, perhaps within his lifetime, it might finally be filled.